Welcome to the Thursday, May 29th, 2025 Special City Council meeting at 6 p.m. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Jensen,
Present.
Councilmember Morgan. Here. Councilmember Garbach. Here. And Mayor Clark.
Here. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Additions and deletions to the agenda.
Staff has no changes to the agenda this evening.
Additional materials?
Staff received 3 emails related to item 6A. All emails were made available for public review and sent to the council in advance of tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Oral communications by members of the public. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak, and you can state your name if you wish for the record. Thank you. Welcome.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay. I've never done this before out of a classroom. Sorry. Okay. My name is Barbara Mack.
Recording in progress.
And I own property at 412 Hill Street in Capitola. And I'm here to ask the council's help. I've had property damage. My property is adjacent to the Turner Lane Mobile Home Park entrance on Hill Street. I'm just going to go through this quickly. I had made some packets for you, thinking I would come some time ago, like this is almost 2 years. And these packets have pictures in them, so there's only 5. But currently, these 4 documents that I'm going to try to race through, this is a diagram of the parking, and it shows my property and the parking at question. There's no setback, so I'm leaving this for you to make copies of to see. I have 2 requests. The first request is on April 1st, I've been in contact with Brian, the planner, who's been really helpful in helping myself and my daughter navigate this. I'm requesting for a code enforcement action for the parking lot violation. Again, the diagram will show the parking lot, and then this letter was sent April 1st. On May 5th, I also requested an abatement for the parking nuisance. There's no setback. The fence has been hit multiple times. I have made multiple police reports. It was hit, a board was hit. I had put up some boards to try to protect the fence. Boards. Time? Okay, this front page, again, that I'm hoping that you can make copies of this and look through this. The top part describes the nuisance and the property damage. The requests below are, the first request would be that there's an abatement of those 3 parking spaces that border the fence. There's multiple, again, Friday I did file a report with Officer Estrada. The board's gone. Nobody knows what happened to it. Again, there's no setbacks, there's no landscaping. On the back of this page are all the codes from other municipalities, including Watsonville and Santa Cruz County. They all have codes addressing landscaping setbacks and property issues with adjoining properties. So those are all listed.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I leave this for copies for?
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Goran Klapic. I play very often basketball at the JC Park. When I encounter garbage or some deficit that appear on the courts of basketball, like broken glass or beer bottles that were left aside, then I think whoever is responsible for that, I don't think it's only the responsibility of Public Works to deal with that. Then the law enforcement must come into the play and find out who is drinking alcohol at J Street Park or other surroundings. As you know, alcohol consumption in California is prohibited in public places. You can only drink alcohol inside a bar, restaurant, or at home. But when you drink alcohol outside, then the police can stop you, and give you a citation if you have too much alcohol in your system. That's what I was dealing when I was serving overseas in the army. I was in the Schweizer Armee, Swiss Army overseas, with military police at the gate together. That's why I speak 5 languages, and I don't speak Spanish. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Frank Makosi, 605 Escalona Drive. This may be a bit unorthodox, so I appreciate you indulging me. But I would like to say a few words about my next door neighbor, Stan Kettner, who passed away over the weekend. I came today to state for the record that Stan was the perfect neighbor for me and my family, and we would not have traded him for anyone we know. I was born and raised on the east side of Santa Cruz, but my family and I moved to Capitola proper only recently. Stan was welcoming in the most productive ways, and the involvement we've had in local activities are largely thanks to him. Stan was helpful, inclusive, loyal, well-informed, and omnipresent. He was a great hang, and he was particularly good with my daughters and the other kids in the neighborhood. My family has been looking forward to years of living next door to someone as reliable and friendly as Stan. We feel like we were just getting started, and we're gutted to miss out on the future that we had envisioned, and he will be sorely missed. Stan's sudden loss is heartbreaking for the Depot Hill neighborhood, and it deprives Capitola of one truly engaged and dedicated citizen. I lament the fact that we have one fewer member who was invested in preserving Capitola's quintessential values, and I challenge myself and my fellow neighbors to follow the example set by Stan in his absence. And I hope that we can look out for each other, advocate for our shared values, and most importantly, maintain meaningful connections that strengthen our community bonds. I think that's the least we can do in his honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm here to tell about this spectacular event the BIA put on last night on the wharf. It was a fundraiser for the Monterey Bay Fishery Trust. It was spectacular. I don't know if you've seen drone shows of it lately on their own Facebook, Instagram. If you were able to come out, it was so nice. The event was ticketed, but the public was still able to see everything going on. We saw people fishing. We saw one guy catch a giant halibut, and, we're all like, hey, the grill's hot, It was a great event. It's really something to see what the BIA can do for this village, and working with our permit process with the city. I think these events will be wonderful to move forward in the future. They don't cost anything out of the general fund. And we had people from all over. No one sitting next to me that I didn't bring to this event. were from the area. Over half, if not more, were from San Francisco and above. Some people were from Connecticut. Some people were from New York. They came from all over. And this group would like to do it again in October 2026. Let's hope we can make it happen. It was spectacular. That's all I can say. And thank you for letting us have the permit for the BIA to do that.
Thank you. See no further public comment? We'll take it to staff comments.
I think we have one comment this evening from staff. It's going to be a surprise.
Yeah, surprise. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're in the last 3 days of the Wharf Public Survey. We had a great community meeting last week. So just want to get the word out for folks to go to the cityofcapitola.org. And right there, if you scroll down, there's a button to take the Wharf survey. We're up to 990 and our goal is 1,000. So we just need a few more. So thank you.
Thank you. Further staff comments? Great. I'll take us to comments from the council.
No comments today. Thanks. Sure, I'll make some comments. So as our community launches Pride Month celebrations, I want to take this opportunity to affirm our city's unwavering commitment to equality, inclusion, and respect for all people, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. Pride is not just a celebration. It's a reminder of the ongoing struggle for civil rights and the power of community, courage, and love. I'm proud to say that for the past 4 years, Capitola has flown the Pride flag for the month of June to celebrate our LGBTQ residents, families, and allies who are vital to the strength and vibrancy of our city. This month and every month, we should stand in solidarity with them, honoring their contributions and acknowledging the challenges they continue to face. I hope we will continue to fly the flag. There's no pause in that, right? Okay, great. I also would like to see another update and presentation from the RTC and county staff regarding the progress of the Coastal Rail Trail project, segments 10 and 11. I think I've mentioned previously that I'd like to see this be a standing item every quarter so we can work through the challenges of the project in a transparent way. So the last time we heard about this was in April. I'd love to see them back in July if we can agendize that. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to make mention about, and I appreciate that Frank showed up from the community and talked to Stan, did a lot of volunteer projects with him. He's, I think, what symbolized what Capitola is all about, dedication, one of those people underneath the radar that no one really knew, but you knew him when you were ever in need of having a project done or help work in our community. And he really brought people together and unified them. And so I appreciate Frank showing up tonight and making a mention about that. But just to echo what a loss it is for our community with Sam not here. And hopefully as we do more volunteer projects, and we don't just focus on the little tiny things, we focus on all our community united together when we have volunteers like that, that they all come together and do special things for special people. So just something I think just keep in the back of our mind. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo what one of our speakers was talking about earlier, the wharf. I was afar and I saw it all from afar, and it was quite remarkable to see our wharf. The weather was awesome. Along with that, over the weekend, the Veterans Surf Alliance also had a paddle out on Memorial Day, and that a huge crowd showed up. It gets bigger and bigger every year, so kudos to that. The hard work of our city staff really showed, and it was fun to watch it from afar. Thank you. That'll bring us to general government. That's what we're all here for.
All right, Mayor and Council, this is the second of our budget hearings. I want to welcome everyone from the public, go over a little bit of what we're going to be talking about this evening. First, we'll go over kind of the budget process, then we're going to talk about corrections and edits since our last hearing. We're going to talk about Measure Y revenue and expenditure, summarize that. It's been something that's been discussed in the past. We're going to get a presentation about our capital improvement program from our Public Works Director and the projects that are in the queue, and talk a little bit about some options moving forward. And then we're going to be following up on some items the council brought up during the May 15th hearing that required follow-up. We'll be talking about the community grant program, the website update, economic development opportunities, camp and the little campers, Public Records Act request costs, and city council goals. So we published our draft agenda on May 2nd. This is our initial review with the Finance Advisory Committee happened on May 13th. We had our first budget hearing with the council on May 15th, and we are now May 29th. And so we have 2 more budget hearings that are scheduled if we need to. Often we have canceled them if the council reaches consensus on the budget before then. And then budget adoption is scheduled for June 26th, which is a regular city council meeting. I will note, for those of you in the audience who are interested, that we'll have an earlier start time. We often start that meeting early as it's the last meeting before our summer break, and it often has a very busy agenda to get through all the business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our star of the evening, our Finance Director, Jim Malberg, and he's going to lead us through the presentation.
Thanks, Jamie. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just kind of a quick recap. We've made a couple of administrative changes that I'll cover in a few minutes, but right now we still have a structurally balanced proposed budget with an estimated ending fund balance of June of 2026 of $653,000. We also still have $100,000 set aside for the Employee Down Payment Assistance Program. Their major threat to our budget continues to be PERS and the increasing cost. Our UAL's gone up from 21 million to 35 million in the last 2 years, and our payment from 2.1 million to 2.9 million in the last 2 years. And part of that challenge is because we have a heavy reliance on sales tax and TOT, making up over half of our budget. A reminder, our reserves are below our target balances, and we are still awaiting some of the storm damage stuff from FEMA and Cal OES, and we anticipate using those funds for that. Next slide, please. So this is slightly different. I think last time on that bottom box down there for the proposed budget, we were balanced with like $2,700, and now we're at 67. So again, I'll touch on that, and then their plan for fiscal year 27 looks a little bit better as well. They all do, but for those. We're also tracking some new revenue. We don't have those in those numbers I just went over, but if those economic development opportunities actually come in online starting in this year and going out, it would change our budget, makes it actually look pretty good for the next 5 or 6 years. Basically balanced or pretty close all the way through. But again, we're not counting that at this point. So total or estimated ending fund balance, $753,000 with $100,000 set aside for the Employee Down Payment Assistance Program. The next, so these are the corrections that I made. So the first one was in the parks budget for rental contracts for portable toilets. I had added an extra 0 there. So we don't pay $72,000 a year for portable toilets. It's $7,200. So that we reduced that expense by just under $65,000. Had a minor tweak on our liability and workers' comp insurance. We had an estimate of $945. The actual came in just slightly above that, so we adjusted that to $300. And so our impact to the general fund increases $64,500 of available resources for this year. A couple of other things in the city manager department goals. In the department section, we had listed just the Capitola Mall as economic development. When we issue the next draft for council adoption on the 26th, that will say citywide economic development. Also, we've added a goal. We had missed the first pass of pursuing tobacco enforcement grants with the police department. You will see that in there. And then I think during the first budget hearing, I mentioned that we have earmarked $133,000 for the community grant program. Those grants all end this June. So we just have an earmark there waiting for council direction later on this year. The The same applies to the ECYP funding. However, I hadn't cleared those columns out. Those grants also expire this June. So in the final draft that you see for adoption, those will now show as unallocated and not actually granted out. And those grant recipients all know that those end this June. Next slide. So and this is kind of an oversimplified way of looking at Measure Y. Our Measure Y estimated revenues are just over 1.1 million. Our increase in personnel costs are just over 1.1 million. So that breaks down with one-time equity adjustments and benefit increases of 449,000. Those were directly related to Measure Y. Those were things that were negotiated last year, and with the passage of Measure Y came into play. Our CalPERS unfunded actuarial liability increased 343,000. We always anticipate some change there, but that's the second year in a row that that number's been between 350 and 400,000. So we were not anticipating that big of a number last year. And then our cost of living adjustments, which again negotiated through MOUs and step increases that employees get as they go through the progression of their career, was 312,000. Next slide. Easier to look at. We put that into a graph. So really the Measure Y direct is that equity adjustment and benefit increases. Can you go back to that slide? Again, the COLAs and the steps were negotiated, all of that we knew. So we really, last year when we were at this time of year thinking that we would have somewhere between $300,000 to $400,000 of Measure Y surplus revenues. Really, the PERS UAL has taken that. Again, this is kind of oversimplified because you'll see the difference is 17,000. We have about 67,000. So our other revenues, primarily property tax, is really the increase in property tax is kind of covering the inflation for all of our non-personnel costs. And again, we rely on sales tax so much, and it doesn't typically keep up with inflation. That's kind of where Measure Y is hitting this year. I think that's it for my slide. One more slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one more slide. So, and I can go back to that if you have questions. We did have a FAC meeting on the 20th and went through our second one. And the FAC agreed with the staff recommendations from our first budget hearing at council regarding Measure Q and the two parks maintenance workers utilizing Measure Q funds, utilizing the Measure S to repay the $856,000 to the general fund, which will take a little over 5 years. They agreed with or supported the parking pay station, phasing those down to a couple of strategically located throughout the village and reducing our maintenance cost. They were supportive of the countywide radio project, utilizing the half supplemental law enforcement services fund money, which is restricted for law enforcement, and half general fund dollars. But they did want to look at that funding kind of allocation on an annual basis, not just automatically plug it 50-50 each year. Supported the staff's recommendation on utilizing the FEMA and Cal OES reimbursements for the reserves, and also supported adding the parametric insurance to our liability insurance plan. That's at $20,000 for that annual premium. The other item that we went over was contract services, and it was a lot of information really quick for them, so they asked to follow up on the 17th. So we will have another conversation about contract services at the FAC, and there may or may not be some recommendations that when we come back on the 26th, I don't know if we might have one of the other ones in there. The 18th. I guess if we do the special hearing on the 18th, we could do it then. It would be really quick turnaround. But if they make any recommendations, it would probably be the 26th that I would daylight those. That is it for me. I can pause if you want for any of that. No? Okay. Capital improvement.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to give you an overview of the projects we have in the queue for next fiscal year. Next slide, please.
So just quickly for anyone in the audience who is not familiar with the term CIP, it stands for Capital Improvements Program. It can also stand for Capital Improvement Project, depending on what you're talking about. It is a multi-year plan for infrastructure investments, so streets, parks, buildings, anything Public Works touches. Here we have a minimum cost threshold for a CIP of $50,000, which is relatively low, and many of our projects range in the millions of dollars. They are multi-year projects because they include many project phases, such as planning, design, obtaining funding, either through the general fund, grants, other sources, and then, of course, construction. So all of our projects this year have multiple funding sources. These projects are adopted by the City Council. One of our strategic goals from our strategic plan that you adopted earlier this year was to create a 5-year CIP document so it's easier for the public to track these projects over time. And we do plan to start the development of that in this coming fiscal year. Next slide, please. So this year we have 7 active projects, many of which are multi-million-dollar projects. So we are not proposing any new projects for fiscal year 25-26. Again, there are many funding sources, including state and federal grants from the Federal Highway Administration, the state, CDBG. I believe the State Water Board is also one of our funding sources for these projects. It also includes local funds, which are formula funds from Measure D and SB1, and then prior general fund appropriations. Again, many of these projects have blended funding models, but it's important to note for this fiscal year, there's no anticipated impact to the general fund other than prior appropriations. So the funding, again, many places, the general funding for this year's set of projects is only at 18%, which is relatively low. In the next slide, we break down those other funds. Here we have our 7 projects, which are a combination of roadway projects and infrastructure site improvement projects. Next slide. Those other funds come in forms of grants that we have been applied for. Also, some are earmarks that we've received supported from our state and federal officials. Fundraising primarily from the Friends for the Treasure Cove project, some federal disaster funds from FHWA, the Federal Roads Administration, and then restricted revenue, which is really the gas tax, SB1, Measure D. So the projects, our Jade Street Park projects, we currently have 2 projects that we're working on, one under construction, which is the community center renovation. That's a mixture of funding from CDBG, CNRA, which is the state parks, and then appropriations from the general fund over multiple years. And then our new project we anticipate coming into construction this fiscal year is the Treasure Cove Playground project. We have general funding in that as well, some of which has been spent on planning and design. Approximately $1 million in fundraising from the County Park Friends, which is incredibly exciting. And then we have an outstanding grant application with CDBG that we expect to hear from hopefully before we adopt this budget at the end of next month. Next slide, please. We have 2 resiliency projects. One is the Cliff Drive Resiliency Project. That funding at this time is with FHWA, it's the Federal Highway Administration, and then a grant from the Coastal Commission, which is the match to that federal grant. The way those federal grants work is they only distribute them a portion at a time. So while we do anticipate getting $10 million in construction for this project, they only release it at the planning stage at this time. So we have that $743,000 from FHWA in hand, and we're working on the design and permitting of this very complicated project with multiple agencies, but anticipate requesting the funding for construction later this year. The other resiliency project we have is the Stockton Bridge Debris Mitigation Project. You may recall this was sponsored by State Senator Laird, and the money came through the State Water Board. We approximately have $785,000 for that project. And we had brought that to council earlier this year, and we currently are doing further evaluation on the bridge's structural integrity. Next slide. The 41st Avenue project that came to you all a couple council meetings ago for multimodal improvements and then also pavement rehabilitation. This is funded with our formula funds from Measure D and SB1, and then also a grant we received from the RTC. As stated during that previous meeting, it is also in design and permitting, and we anticipate constructing that project next spring. Lastly, we have some projects in the queue in that design and permitting stage. One is the Bay Avenue corridor. There was $80,000 in general fund allocated to that project in this fiscal year. We are just beginning our outreach to the property owners on both those corners, and then anticipate doing outreach to the greater community later this summer. Still on the books is the Park Avenue traffic calming project that has approximately $80,000 from the general fund in it, and is at a phase of concept development. We have drawings for that project. We did public outreach for that project, but staff doesn't recommend going forward with the construction of that project, which would be a striping project, until the coastal rail trail and the area plans are finalized. Next slide, please. And then 2 future CIP projects, not currently with Public Works, but currently with Community Development, is the 41st Avenue Corridor project. They are collecting traffic data and are anticipating having that project completed by the end of this calendar year. And then the Wharf Master Plan, which is also in concept development. And again, the survey is closing at the end of this week if anyone hasn't taken it. Next slide. So there are some upcoming grant opportunities, particularly that we know are coming in the short term, is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is state parks. That grant requires a 50% match. So if it's $1 million project, we would need to come up with $500,000, and they give us $500,000. There's the state coastal conservancy grants, which are on a rolling basis that are really about public access. And then Measure Q, which we anticipate that we can apply for later this year, but those requirements for that grant funding have not come out yet. Road project funding that we know is coming up in the near future is the call for projects. The RTC is the conduit for a lot of state funding that we, as a region, get as formula funding, and then the agencies competitively apply for those grants. So that is coming up later this summer. There is an airborne grant that is open right now for emission reduction projects, such as bike lanes or potentially roundabouts. CDBG, we anticipate being up again this fall and intend on applying for the Bay Avenue roundabout project. And then there's still that active transportation plan grant with Caltrans that we expect to hear yay or nay on later this summer.
I think this is my slide. So when looking at the overall budget, the council has established a kind of a prior fund balance target of about $500,000. That's intended to be sort of a cushion against just sort of the various things that happen over the course of a $21 million budget. And so if we still aim for that $500,000 fund balance target, we could look at around $75,000 to $125,000 in project funding to support a project. Our recommendation would be to maybe identify a project that could be, our funding could be matching funds to leverage it and go further, or potentially implementation of one of the smaller projects. On this list is projects that we've talked about in the past. We've talked about a Noble Gulch Dog Park. That was, I think, under $100K was kind of the rough cost estimate. I want to say maybe 80, if I remember right. And that project was left with the council saying to some community members who've been advocating for it, they could consider a fundraising campaign, and the city may consider allocating it future budgets. I haven't heard about a fundraising campaign. There's the City Hall Phase 2. Phase 1 was looking at our existing facility and identifying what the needs were. Phase 2 is looking more at what are the options to address those needs. That would be the beginning of a very ambitious project. I'm not sure necessarily that this is the right stage to kick that one off, but we do have a scope of work for that, and I believe it's in the $80,000 range. Esplanade Park rehabilitation. Esplanade Park, that was a project that had some funding a couple of years back. We used the funding. I think we may have allocated it. Gosh, I don't remember if it may have been RISPIN. Actually, for pavement, we allocated it back into a pavement project. So it's been a project that's been talked about for a long time. You know, the park was designed a long time ago, and I think a lot of people have thought that there's potential for kind of moving it forward into the future. Cortez Park, also called Hidden Park, the tot lot there, probably could use an update at some point. And then pickleball facilities. You may remember in last year's budget, we identified completing a pickleball survey as a goal for this year, which our Community Service and Recreation Department has completed. And 86 out of the 102 residents who responded are interested in pickleball. We have those data. We're prepared to present them at an upcoming meeting when we get a little bit of time. Again, this funding wouldn't be enough to do pickleball courts. It would really just kind of be either seed money to start planning or for future grants. And then also council may have other ideas that they want to toss out there. Next slide, please. So then we're going to touch on the follow-up items from the 15th budget hearing. The community grant program, talk about our website and work request tracking, economic development sort of ideas that staff is going to bring forward, Camp Capitola and the Little Campers, Public Records Act request and the attorney costs associated, and then city council goals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chloe, and she's going to fill us in about the community grant program.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just some background information on the community grant program as it generally has gone and was presented in the draft budget. As Finance Director Malberg mentioned, the overall allocation to the program was in the draft budget, nothing to any specific grantees because we have no idea what would happen moving forward with that. So as a reminder, what generally has been done and is in the budget is just over $133,000 towards the entire grant program. Some of that, I'm having a hard time seeing the screen. Some of that is towards the Homeless Action Partnership, which is a regional, thank you so much to our clerk, a regional group, which some of the funding goes towards that specifically. And then $60,000 of restricted money for in ECYP for early childhood and youth programming has generally gone towards grants specifically for children and youth. And then just to be clear, other restricted funding does go towards members of our community. Our community development director can get more into this if desired, but through CDBG and our PLAHA funds, through Gray Bears and Second Harvest specifically, so they don't usually get community grants because they qualify for this restricted funding. So the program as it has been, we are prepared to have a hearing for council in July where council can look into and provide direction on the grant program, the cycle, if it's 3 years more or less, and then creating an ad hoc committee to review the applications that we would receive and determine how you want to allocate that larger number towards the applicants. So generally after that, we would have the notice of funding available and the application period over the summer, and the ad hoc committee would review with staff and make a formal recommendation to the full council in September to allow for the allocations to be approved in October, and then what has generally been, twice a year, the grantees receive funding beginning December, and then I believe in June, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just an overview. And then as you can see, this is the annual allocations that had been approved the past 3 years. So that has come to a close with 2025, but the breakdown of how these grants kind of shook out, if it were, for youth, again, that's restricted funding, so $60,000. And then specifically for senior care, $38,000, a small amount towards arts and culture, and then a large proportion for community care in general. So that's just different programming that really helps our at-risk communities. And then moving forward, go ahead.
On that one,
Please
there
do.
is one detail on that historically our community grant program was $250,000 and it's now $125,000. And what we ended up doing was some of our major recipients were Second Harvest, Food Bank, Gray Bears, and Community Bridges. And we were actually able to pull them out of the community grant program and directly fund them through CDBG funding. So it's included in there in sort of a bullet, but it's more than $125,000 a year that does flow, kind of moved out of the community grant program and flowed into CDBG and it's assistance that we do provide to those nonprofits, Gray Bear, Second Harvest, and Community Bridges. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Apologies.
Thank you. I'm glad that you were able to clarify that. So moving forward, another item that council asked us to bring back was some more information on the current goal in the city manager department for a citywide website update, as well as some information about request tracking. So I'm actually very excited about this project. This is a goal for the coming fiscal year. The last time we updated our website, as some of you may remember, was in 2020, which really was wonderful because it corresponded with, sadly, the pandemic, when everyone needed information remotely. So we were really looking and diving into getting our website more user-friendly, more information, easier to find. And so here we are 5 years later, and we need to do it again because things change. So I'm looking forward to doing kind of a major overhaul of all of our different departments, just making it for the public and not necessarily for staff who already know what they're looking for, but working with the public to see what do you want to find, what is makes sense to you, and what could be maybe a little bit more intuitive so that there's better access to government and more transparency. So that's really the impetus for that goal. And then regarding the question that came up about, I think perhaps like a CRM, kind of a customer service management program, our current web provider, we do not have the ability to have a program like that with our current agreement. However, we are now reviewing the available tools that we do have to have better customer service online. So there's maybe auto response, and that the people that have made a complaint or a request feel like they're part of the process and that they're informed along the way. So that is something that we're adding to that goal. I think that's all I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Next, I'll touch upon economic development. I really appreciated all the thought that went into those discussions, the first budget meeting. And tonight, I'll be showing you some updated goals that we've put that will be in the budget document, in the final budget document. Also, a new department name, the BP, the Building Planning and Economic Development Department, to rebrand it so that the public feels like they've got a place to come in and talk about their businesses and feel supported. Which is what we strive to do within the Community Development Department, but it sounds more welcoming. And then launching an expanded economic development strategy, so I'll get more into that. The cost, we're estimating about $20,000 per year. So economic development goals, I'm not gonna read these verbatim to you, but this is what came out of the last City Council budget meeting in terms of rebranding, also creating a strategy for economic development, and then both in the city manager's department as well as community development to really engage with the different property owners throughout the city. We called out 3 in here of the major players that we'd like to see redevelop sooner rather than later, including the mall and a couple others. And that is echoed within the city manager department goals as well. And then the housing element strategy. And housing is a key strategy to economic development because if we don't have a housing for our workforce, we're at a loss. So, and that's one of the major trends that we see in our regional reports for businesses and keeping businesses here. It's a struggle when you don't have housing for your workforce. So next slide, please. So economic development strategy, currently we have underway the placemaking and branding for 41st Avenue. That will be done by the end of the year. You'll start hearing more and more about that as we take the wharf offline to work on it for a while, and then we'll be jumping into 41st. Retail consulting contract, I've been in touch with either 4 or 5 different companies that do retail consulting for their cities and really brainstormed with them of what they would have available. Anything from updating your website to putting together economic development strategies. One that sounded really interesting is really a on-call consultant practice that as sites come up, you can work with the consultant and also the business owners to see what can be done to attract new businesses to sites. A hotel incentivized zone, as you know, TOT is a huge contributor to our general fund, and We want to look at ways in which we can, similar to housing, incentivize hotels into coming into town. With that, I want to look through our code and see if there's any other changes that we can tweak for economic development. So, but that would be the major one for hotels. And then also, we're jumping into the Capitola Mall incentivized zoning right now. So that we are expected to complete by the end of the year per our housing element. And so that's going to be a big lift for the second half of 2025. Next slide. So, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. So in the last budget hearing, we were discussing more opportunities for the TK kindergarten or 4 and 5-year-olds within the community. And so looked at this issue from a couple of different directions. The first one was to take a look at our Camp Capitola Littles program. And with a slight modification, we're able to increase the capacity of that program by 20%. This is the maximum capacity that that program is able to hold. And that's largely due to the facility limitations that we have for our program. And looking at it from a different angle, staff reached out to some of our community partners that would naturally move into spaces and working with this age cohort of youth, and just to kind of see if there might be any interest. And this could be a ECYP community grant priority the council could consider. Additionally, looking at how the overall demand of that of the Littles program for that particular age cohort. In the past, we have addressed those kind of situations by limiting the number of sessions that a participant could be enrolled in. So a really easy example is that in the pandemic, when we were offering our junior guard program, and we had to really restrict the number of individuals that could enroll, we set the expectation that you could only enroll in 1 session. And that allowed us to maximize the number of individuals that we were able to reach with the program. It's a pretty standard practice for similar agencies when they do have a capacity limit. So that's something that we could consider. Additionally, just how we do with our junior guard program, we could consider offering a resident priority registration. All right, thank you.
So this slide is for our city attorney, who I believe is online and ready to go. Hi, Sam.
Hey, everybody. So I will talk to you a little bit about Public Records Act requests, where I and my office spend an inordinate amount of our time these days. A quick overview of how a request works. The request comes into the clerk's office. If it doesn't come into the clerk's office, if it comes in some other place in the city, it will be routed to the clerk's office. The clerk then reviews the request and routes it to staff. So if the request seeks information from various city departments, various boards or commissions, the clerk will route it to whoever needs to provide documents for us to respond. Then the clerk and my office will work together to review any records. I should back up and say at some point, if necessary, the clerk and my office will work together to sort out search terms. And then we will work together to review any records that various staff members produce. If the records include emails, we'll have IT. The clerk will have IT search the email accounts, city email accounts. So we get a set of documents. The clerk then does a pass of the documents, and then sometime some of those documents will come to my office to review. If our office is involved, we will work with the clerk's office to prepare the production. If it's a particularly large production over several thousand documents, sometimes my office will be involved in managing the production. We'll bait stamp the documents. We'll do whatever the clerk's office needs to help get the production out the door. And then the records are released to the requester. If there aren't that many records, the clerk's office just handles it. If there are multiple, like I said, thousands of records, we'll sometimes produce on a rolling basis because we just don't have capacity to review and prepare that many documents for production that quickly. Every one of certainly my clients and clients with the firm, all of our cities and public agencies have seen a dramatic increase in public records requests over the last several years. Some of them are due to changes in state law. One example is I'm frozen on my screen. I hope I'm not frozen on yours. One example is state law changed in the last few years regarding police records. And so all of our cities got a request from a college doing a study. And so we all had to turn over various records that had not previously been public. In addition to that, a lot of cities are getting significant requests from individuals. And that has certainly been the case in Capitola. And those can result in significant records. And so we pulled some figures to tell you how many records Capitola has been dealing with. This is just the past several records requests that we've been dealing with. Between the past 4 large requests, the clerk's office has reviewed approximately 20, 30, 40,000 documents. Of those, approximately 15,000 came to my office for further review. And of those, we produced approximately 4,000 to the various requesters. The reason documents will get pulled out from the production and not go to the requester is often they are non-responsive because there's no real targeted way that we can pull records in response to a request. We often have to do a very large pull, and then we get a lot of documents that are non-responsive. Sometimes they're attorney-client privilege, sometimes they implicate personnel records, sometimes they're police records. There are various exemptions in the PRA, so those are documents we would not disclose. So that's usually how my office is involved. We will determine what documents are not subject to disclosure under the statutes. Any questions? I could talk about the PRA all day, but that would be so boring.
We're at the question.
I can't. Oh, there you go.
I don't think we have any questions at this time, Sam. We'll take questions, I guess, at the end.
Okay, great. I'll stick around.
Okay, so then the next item that came up, council questions, were about the draft city council goals that were printed in the draft agenda. So these on this slide here show the goals that are printed in the draft agenda, and the council is welcome to make any adjustments or changes to them before we finalize the agenda. Sorry, budget. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Well, I'll take this one, I guess. So our next scheduled special meeting would be another budget hearing on June 5th, if needed. And then we have a regular city council meeting on June 12th, where again, we can talk about any budget items if we wanted to consolidate them there. And the regular FAC meeting is June 17th. And then a potential special meeting on June 18th, and then the June 26th regular council meeting where we have adoption scheduled. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Jim to bring us up.
So for recommendations for this evening, it is to identify if there's any additional budget questions that you want us to follow up on, and then to provide direction regarding allocation for small CIPs or grant matching funds, potentially, the economic development strategy, little campers, and potentially using ECYE grant or funding and making that a priority, city council goals if you want to make any amendments to that, and then either direct staff to prepare the final budget for consideration on June 26th and cancel the remaining hearings or continue these deliberations to June 5th? I believe now we are at questions.
We'll open up to council questions to start at this end.
All right, thank you. So a couple additional goals that I think that might have been mentioned, and I just wonder if they could be included. One was to highlight, I think the Captain Ryan was going to have the emergency plan for the police. So if that can get noted as a goal for this year, I know some of it's dependent on the OR3 funding, but if also if we have a backup plan, if that funding doesn't come in, how that project or that plan will be completed or allocated. So if you're a plan or how that's going to look, and maybe you can just update that to us at the end of our budget session, not this, but when we finalize it. Like, I'm just looking for a backup plan. I hate to come back and I don't know what the funding timeline is for OR3, but if there is no funding or we don't get it, I think it's important that we have a plan in place, so a contingency, I guess, for that. The second one was, I think it falls under, I don't know, city manager. We talked about having a an additional academy, like, so having an academy every year for council, if people are interested in running for council or being more involved in our community. And if we could look at what that is, I know you're looking at kind of a hybrid approach to that. Maybe not the same council or the same type of council training every year, but I think just getting people and encourage our community to wanting to serve is really important. So if that could be also on there. And then the only I would propose to the other council members around a council member goal would be, I think it'd be great for us to update and review in detail our code of conduct policy. And so if council could agree to that as a goal, I'd like to start, that as a goal that I would like to see our council just review, refresh, and update if needed, what that looks like. And I'm up to having questions about that as other council members share their thoughts. So a couple of just general questions I have, and then what's the process we're going to use? Questions, and then go out to the community, and then come back and say what our wishes are? Is that the best way to go? Okay. So first one, and I guess just kind of comments around the community grants. When we do get to that process, which I know is a little bit later on, one thing I would like to look at, the idea I think I shared before, was about a 4-year term instead of a 3-year term process, and if that can be looked at. Other one was, I guess, a way that there's more accountability for an outside organization who gets community funding, that there's a requirement that they have to come back and report to the council. I know it's talked about a lot, but I don't think I've seen every person that has gotten money come back and report what impact the funds that the city gives out, which are indirectly the citizens give out, what the benefit is back to the community. And so I think that should really be a focus and emphasize. If it's a 4-year term, I would like not to see just them at the end of 4 years, but if they reported back, whatever would be realistic, it'd be great to get updates once a year from people and see how the impact we're doing in the community is working. Next thing is a question for you. What's the backup plan if we do not get the funding for the Jade Street playground, the COPE project of $450,000, $475,000? Do we have a backup plan before we approve the budget at the end of the June city council meeting? Because I think we have a commitment from previous council and from the community that raised so much money to make sure that's funded. And if that grant doesn't come through, what is our backup plan? And if you have one, if you can share that. My next question is, comes from, I guess, Measure Y. It's just very concerning to me that we just, I think all of us on council here and our community work really hard to go out and support our community and to go out and have a tax increase of 0.25%. And there's a lot of communication about what that was going to provide and benefit. And I think there's many people that were very supportive of having oversight and accountability and what that looks like. I appreciate the slide that Jim shared this evening showing where the money went, but I don't want to burn up all the time here from the dais and from council, but it'd be something I would really like to go back to FAC and have that number really broken into. I think, if we're going to go forward as a community and ever have another tax measure, I know myself, I thought there was going to be, potential $200,000 to $300,000, $400,000 a year that would be used for community improvements, whatever that is, youth programs, streets. I mean, if you read the ballot measure, it does talk about improved services, which that gets down to salaries for our employees, which was very much needed. But if we look back and all those dollars were now used up, except for, I think if I wrote that down, $17,179 out of the projected total Measure Y money, if that was all that was going to be left. I don't know if I read that wrong, but I think we got to be really accountable to how that impact was, and if it is all because of PERS, what changed from when we put the ballot measure together in July and till like today, if that's what happened. I think we just got to be really clear on why that is and why our Measure Y funds aren't going to be enhancing any additional projects other than, which is very important, employee salaries and the PERS retirement. And then if that's just doom and gloom because tax revenue is down, and then if they could share that information back to the fact on if we have a great year and tax revenue is up, that's where the money is. And so I think just being able to tell the story is really important. A question, I guess, around the CIP projects on Park Avenue. If we talk about the one on Park Avenue, I think I read in our packet that was sent out to us yesterday, says it's on hold. And I'd like to have a little bit further discussion about why that is. And then tonight I see it's about the RTC future plans. And I was wondering if you could give some insight to that and what that really is, and if we can have a discussion about that this evening or where we are. I know that project was talked about in 22. That project was talked about in 23. I know it was heavily talked about during the time when we were just going through Measure L 8.7.2. And it was always talked about that was going to be a cost savings to the city, but it was unanimously voted on by this council that that the direction was it was going to stay on the rail trail corridor. And so now with a need that traffic calming, which is highly noted on Park Avenue just for traffic and bike lanes and stuff, how with the project completely funded, but only at 65 or 70% drawn or whatever, how we could move that project forward in a manner that would identify what our needs are up on Park Avenue. And I would have some follow-up questions if we are able to work out some additional funding for the TK program. I would have some just follow-up questions, but I'll share that if we get to that point. And that's all my questions I have right now. So I don't know if we want to have that conversation about the Park Avenue now, or we'll have that after all the council.
I can respond to the questions. The first one about the mini academy, that is in the work plan to do that this summer, kind of incorporating it into a tabling event, I think in conjunction with the Twilight concerts, something our city clerk is excited about organizing, and then a mini academy and see how that goes. So we plan to give that a shot this year so we can add that to CM goals. Report backs on the community grants. You may or may not recall if you've had history with this, but the community grant program has two types of grants. We have, I think they're called operational grants, and they're under $5,000 or less. And those actually were intended not to have report backs. It was more just sort of like sustaining funding for the nonprofits. And then we have the operational grants, which are at $7,500 or more, and they require a report back during the 3-year cycle. When we talk in July, I think that's a great opportunity for council to review that entire program and see, do we want to have a different threshold of report backs? Do we want to have more frequent report backs, less, whatever you want? So I think that July date is a good opportunity to dive in and we can kind of really learn all about the community grant program since we haven't done it in 3 years. And maybe moving forward, it'll be every 4. Honestly, about the question about CDBG and a backup plan for the UA playground, at this point, I think I would go as far enough to say is that staff is very confident in the CDBG grant. We expect to get a final signed contract in the near future. So do we have a backup plan? No, but we are very confident that that funding is going to come through prior to the adoption of the budget. The question about Measure Y is a hard one. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we were all anticipating that there would be between $300,000 and $400,000. That was the figure I remember, as well as what we thought would be sort of surplus after Measure Y. And you see that there's essentially no surplus. You know, we have about $60,000 citywide surplus. And it does go to the reasons that Finance Director Malberg talked about, the increase in PERS costs. But in addition, it also points to another issue that Jim talked about, which is our heavy reliance on sales tax and TOT. You may have noticed in our multi-year projection, we had sales tax growing at 1% and TOT growing at 0% next year. Those are basically on flat numbers this year. You know, when you look at it, those two combined sources end up being like, gosh, close to $10 million. So, you know, you throw 1 or 2, 3% growth on $10 million and there's your $300,000. And so, you know, I think having the Finance Advisory Committee take a little bit more of a look and understand that and see those numbers. But that is, it's the unfortunate truth is that when we have reliance on such a volatile revenue stream, you know, these numbers do change and they can change pretty quickly. Unlike, you know, property tax revenue, which is a lot more predictable.
Just one follow-up on that, real quick. I saw one thing in there, there's a goal that coming back over like Measure Y update like twice a year. And just if we can highlight those things, I mean, I know it's the story, but it's just how we tell the story to the community and just highlight what our tax, I mean, generic or brief as it possibly can be, I think is really good to understand it. It is based off those two metrics that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I mean, at the end of the day, when it is nearly $10 million of revenue, and in my career, I've seen years where we had sales tax go down 18% in 1 year. So 18%, you know, and if you have that kind of movement on a major revenue source for a city, it has major budget implications. And so always keep that in the back of your mind when we're looking at these multi-year estimates that, you know, they're a crystal ball and they're the best crystal ball we've got. But at the end of the day, they are subject to the sort of the whims of the economy and our economic development efforts. You know, we have had some real wins and there are some projects that are in the pipeline that really could, as Jim pointed out, really help our long-term projections. And then lastly, just about the Park Avenue bike lane project. Staff is proposing putting that on hold, I think for key reason is we don't know what the RTC is going to do at the end of the day. I mean, at this point, I know that they're pursuing the coastal alignment for the trail there. If that happens, I think our project is still a great one the way it was originally envisioned. I think it could end up in a lot of different places ultimately. It may not get built along that segment. Maybe they end up saying that they can't do it. And so then they're talking to us about helping us fund a better version of the project we have. I don't know. But it just feels like at this stage, I don't think the $80,000 fully funds the work. So you'd have to be taking some of the dollars you already have, and then you'd be kind of committing to that plan. And I think that there's just still a little bit of fluidity in what the RTC is going to ultimately do, which may impact what the council wants to do. So that's the reason for the recommendation. But if council wanted to appropriate more funds and have us proceed with that project this year, that's certainly something. It's certainly something we can do.
I appreciate Councilmember Orbach's comment about having the RTC come back. I think she was saying a couple times a year. I think it'd be great. Today I walked around with Rob Timmore and walked all the projects, and I asked him directly about Park Avenue. He told me at the present time there is no changes. It's being designed as per the direction of 8.7.2, and so it's interesting to hear that. And so just concerned as our community spoke out about, especially traffic calming and statistics up there with a project that's been talked about for many years. I just would encourage that we get to a point pretty soon that we could look at moving that project forward. So thank you.
Let me see, questions. Okay. I know we've got, you talked about taking out the big three, community bridges, Gray Bears, and Second Harvest out of the community grant program because we're able to secure CDBG grants for those organizations. Is this funding we have to apply for every year, every few years? How secure or how confident are you that we are able to continue to apply for these grants?
I'll let Katie respond.
So the CDBG program has been evolving over the last few years. There was coronavirus funding, and then 2 years ago, they did $500,000 that we divided between the three organizations. This past year, the award that we're waiting to hear on, that the $500,000, Community Bridges got a lot of funding, Second Harvest, and Gray Bears got less. So this round, they said you could only apply for two. So we have Second Harvest and Gray Bears moving forward for $300,000 split. And then my plan is this summer we'll apply for Community Bridges again. So we're just kind of rotating through. So it's typically on an annual basis. And right now the program is for up to 2 service providers.
And then the hopes is we will continue to apply for them.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I've got more questions here. Let's see. I know there was an item on the budget that we have a $100,000 employee assistant program. How many members of our staff have utilized this program?
So that's a really easy question to answer, 0.
Okay.
We've had one applicant. They did try to pursue purchasing a house, but I think we have a 6-month timeline to utilize the funds, and they were unable to identify a home in the county that was eligible. So we are actually going out, and we have another lottery process to allocate it that we'll be doing relatively soon, I think, a couple weeks, and we have 2 applicants so far, city staff, who've applied.
Okay. Have we looked at why it's so underutilized? Because we've had it for many years, right? I would assume people would want to get on this. I just think about with the increase of cost of living, whether that's sufficient, whether we have increased the amount because of the increase in costs of homes.
It's a hard question to answer. I think that the program, it's not the program, I think, that's holding back its success. We don't have that many numbers. We don't have that many employees, and we don't have that many employees who are looking to buy houses. So I think that's certainly a factor. The cost of housing in this region is significant. We initially had a cap. I don't think you could buy a house that was over $1 million. And then when we updated the program last, we updated that threshold, I think, 1.5 or something, to try to accommodate the fact that there weren't any houses for under $1 million. So it's been an evolving thing. The fact that we have at least two employees who are interested this time around, I think really is exciting. And it would be a good program. Just for members of the public who aren't aware, this is a loan program. It serves as a second to employees. It's a silent second for the first 5 years, at which point then they begin paying interest on it. And it's a loan, and when it's repaid, it would be repaid to the city and could be recycled. So just so everyone kind of understands the basic framework. I will note that our city attorney is online. So if there are any city attorney questions, we might want to knock them out. And if not, we might be able to let her get on with her evening. And not that I wouldn't like to do the same for all of us, but.
I'm fine.
Okay. Thank you so much for helping out tonight, Sam.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thanks. I think I just have comments. Let's see.
For the deliberation.
Right. Sure. I'd like to ask the question. Well, I don't need to ask this question. I'll make a comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-up questions. We had, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, we had mentioned at the FAC possibly being able to seek grants for the radio project. Did we already talk about that last time? So is that something we might be able to do? Okay. Okay, got it. That's fine. And then in regards to the Noble Gulch and the Esplanade Park, the dog park at Noble Gulch, would the land and water use funds, would that be something we could look into for some grant funding for those projects?
Yes, that grant program funds parks specifically.
Okay, that's what I thought. And are those just specifically matching grants?
The matching requirement for that grant is 50%,
Okay,
which is relatively high as far as grants go, but that is what the current call for projects.
okay, but we had kind of quoted the dog park around, what, do you remember?
Around $100,000.
Okay, okay. Thank you. And then, Chloe, for the website, those improvements are already budgeted. Okay, cool. And then, in regards to Councilmember Jensen's question about the Treasure Cove, I know we're pretty hopeful about our grant, but that 1.1 that is already budgeted that will be working to start the project, it will still get us the like base model of the park, right?
The funding we have will support constructing a park. It wouldn't be the exact park that we have advertised with the Friends.
Okay.
But to the city manager's point, we were very confident. We can issue a grant number. We're going through our environmental with the housing agency on that grant. So it would be a big surprise to everyone if that money did not come.
Right. Okay. All right, great. I think those are all my questions. Thank you.
Great. I'll keep it simple. I just have a couple of questions. Stockton Bridge. Do we have a timeline for the inspections that are happening?
Yes, that will be happening later in July.
July.
Yes, and I anticipate coming back to the council with a report late summer.
The projects and parks money that we had, the little money we had, I'd like to see a portion of it or half of it go to the Esplanade Park. Our little jewel down there is in need of some help. If we could even freshen it up, if we cannot completely redo it, I think that's a great project. Do you think we can add that?
Yeah, that's certainly a project that's been contemplated for a long time. I think maybe as a suggestion, the Measure Q grant funding. So for those of you that recall, the voters in this county passed Measure Q, which supports parks, open space, fire prevention, water quality throughout the county. There's going to be a grant program that's going to be administered countywide of about $1.2 million a year that would be allocated. Capitola's representative on the board is our own Captain Harway, former employee for Central Fire, and they're going to be approving a strategic plan that'll help them figure out how to allocate those grant funds. The word on the street is that they're going to focus, because it's only $1.2 million countywide, on more planning grants. My suggestion would be that maybe we use a chunk of money, maybe $50K as a match to maybe a Measure Q application to try to get $100,000 together to get a design and a plan and figure out what we would want to do, a public process for Esplanade Park. I think that would probably be the best way to use the funds. Otherwise, we could do a $50,000 spruce up project, but I'm not sure that would necessarily achieve our long-term goals.
Since we're talking about projects, I would also like to advocate for a playground in Monterey Park. You know, we go to those Friday food truck events, and my kids are climbing the fences of the little softball field because there's nothing to climb, or they're at the end of the park climbing trees. I know we're looking at pickleball courts potentially in Monterey Park, whether we can couple pickleball courts with a new playground for our community and for our kids in Cliffwood Heights. I think that would be a great use of the funds. And from my understanding, you know, this is for the Measure Q grant programs, it is matching funds. So in order for us to be competitive, we should have funding set aside for design and planning and design so that we can ask for funding for these projects. I know there are a lot of great things we can do, potentially do for our city. Esplanade Park is also a great one for, as an attraction for tourism. But I also, and I think there's value in the resiliency piece of a new park there. But at the same time, it's also at a very risky place right along the coast. So, something for all of us to consider and think about in terms of how we want to use those funds.
Any further council questions?
My request, I'll wait until after I hear public comment, and then I have some comments. So thanks.
Seeing no more council questions, let's open it up to public comment. Welcome.
Thank you. I had a couple things prepared, but a lot of it I think was just addressed between the comments, so I'll try and condense this. First, I love the idea of a playground in Monterey Park. I would advocate for that, for sure. Secondly, I want to thank the city staff for that budget that you put together. I know this takes a ton of effort, and it's really appreciated, okay, even though it may not always be expressed. So I just wanted to comment really quick about the Park Avenue traffic calming project. I went over as best I could the 130 pages in the budget, and it looks like we approved a $100,000 investment in the traffic calming bicycle safety measures for Park Avenue, of which about $44,000 has already been spent. I did see the comments earlier that the staff recommended pausing this until the RTC plans are finalized. And my question is, what plans? We agreed that Municipal Code 8.72 is the law, and that the RTC must keep their project in the rail corridor, and thereby we are now in control of our city streets. So I wouldn't assume that we need to wait for the RTC for anything to proceed with our Park Avenue traffic abatement projects. Only reason this is important to me, my family walks, rides along Park Avenue every single day. The safety, that's super important to us. Once the Municipal Code 8.72 was decided, I would encourage us to proceed with those traffic calming safety measures so that we can get on with our Park Avenue project on our own. It really does not matter what the RTC is going to do because they're doing it in the rail corridor. We're doing our thing on Park Avenue. Again, I do want to thank you guys for all the work you did on this budget. Okay, it's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. I also want to thank Jim and Lita and Louise for all the hard work on putting this budget together. They did a really great job, and it's been a pleasure to work with them on the FAC. There's some revenue challenges, and city managers described them well. But in spite of that, there's a lot of things to really like about the way we're doing things with the budget. The passive investment policy, it's not very exciting, but it's low risk, and it feels good in a time like this, right? It's balanced for now. I think looking at the unfunded liability raises a really important question for us to really consider full-time equivalent headcount. So I think that's something in the next couple of years we have to really consider. Headcount is the gift that keeps giving. So let's make sure we're not creating programs where we're going to have to add a lot until we understand that better. I love the countywide radio program. Officer safety. I mean, I've heard some things, and we've got to do things that keep people safe. So I love that. I'm really excited about what I heard tonight for the first time about economic development. That's huge. We've got to get more creative and interesting ideas going, to start managing the future. Couple things maybe I don't like as much, but they're just things we're all contending with a little bit here. Contract services. Thank you, Jim, for letting us have a workshop forthcoming to look at that. Again, a place there's possibly a lot of opportunities. We outsource animal services. I didn't even know what that was, but it's $139,000. So let's find out if it really is more efficient to outsource it. Let's just look at things that are over 100,000 and ask smarter questions about them. Measure Q, the FAC did support that recommendation, but we also asked for some more information on what that measure could supplement in terms of other costs that are already there. So we supported it, but with a caveat that we would get some information back on what else could be done if we find ourselves in that position. And then Park Avenue, I echo what the speaker before me said. I think there's always ambiguity, and to put things on pause for ambiguity doesn't make sense. And I think it's things like that that happened here tonight is sort of a surprise that drive public records requests. People don't like that. They feel like there's more information that somebody knows that we don't, and it starts the whole nonsense of public records requests again. So move forward with Park Avenue. It's about safety again. We've had this in plan for a long time. And then lastly, Measure Y. The FAC is going to keep looking at that. You know, it is what it is. We kind of knew halfway through the year we'd be in this position and the variability of the UAL. So I'm not totally surprised where we are, but I really want to emphasize how much fatigue there is out there in our community and the county around taxing and bonding. And we've got to have a message for the public of what we're doing with that money. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. One thing I wanted to reiterate from Leslie just speaking was Park Avenue. If indeed RTC Representative Tidmore did have that conversation with Councilmember Jensen today, which could be interesting, if there is nothing happening with the Park Avenue, and it's all going to be separate, and they're doing their design separately and fluid, there is no reason to pause it. I don't see. So as it relates to safety, I know it's been, I looked at some statistics earlier today on a spreadsheet that gave some pretty enlightening focus on the amount of traffic tickets that have been enforced on Park Avenue. So it is a public safety issue. I'd like to see that move forward, and I think it's in our best interest and in the interest of the community. So thank you.
Thank you. See no further public comment. We'll take it back for council deliberation. And I'll start at this end.
Great, thank you. Thanks again, staff, for all of the hard work. I have an ask that hasn't been brought up yet this evening, but in the light of this slight increase in fund balance, I am requesting a RFB crosswalk at the crosswalk on the opposite side of Stockton Bridge, right after you take the left off of Wharf Road. I think it's a kind of a cumbersome corner, and it would sort of bookend the bridge the way it is. So I was looking at costs, and what I found was a huge range. So I'm not asking for like a $22,000 crosswalk, but if the council would humor me in looking into that, that would be one of my number one asks for this budget. Do you have an estimate amount?
So the RFB that we put down on the other side of the bridge, that is approximately $20,000.
Oh, really? Oh my God.
And they
I had
do
no idea when
sell
we did it.
ones that are less expensive. I would not recommend them.
Okay.
They have more maintenance. We've purchased cheaper ones before. That would be the recommendation.
Okay. I totally thought it was like 7 or 8. I feel like, okay, well, you know. Okay, well, that's a big ask, but I'm putting it out there. I am really interested in keeping momentum on the Noble Gulch Dog Park along with Esplanade Park, and looking into the land and water use funds for both of those options. And I think the dog park represents, maybe even Esplanade too, a little bit more whatever we can match to get planning and some funding, but I think they could both also be some fundraising opportunities for the community as well. For I know we had a big force of dog owners that came out when we were discussing that project, and then hopefully it would bring them out of Monterey Park, which is not technically a dog park, even though they're using it as a dog park right now, so we can keep the kiddos safe. Esplanade, I would rather not just do a $50,000 Band-Aid makeover. I'd really like to kind of reach out and see if we can find a consultant for some planning for that. I'm in huge support of utilizing the 60K or whatever portion we need to of the ECYP funding to enhance our 4 to 5 year camps and programs. For lack of sounding spoiled, I think we should prioritize our Capitola residents. And then I think the Park Avenue, we have I know it's not fully funded, but we have a chunk of the funding there. I think if there's a way to move forward, I think that's something that we can do for our community. After there was so much contention in that area, I think we need to sort of come together and create safer spaces. Those are all of my kind of ballpark ideas, which I'm welcome to any feedback. Also, my only other thing, I do have concerns with the pay stations and having less of them. I don't want it's already become sort of a nuisance for people. I know we struggle with the weather and the way that the meters operate or the pay stations operate. But I'm concerned about having less only because I don't want to lose accessibility for people that join us here and tourists here and people who don't use mobile applications on phones. It's part of our community. It's people that visit here. So that is my one concern. I know we're looking at it as a budgetary item, but it's just something that I want to put out there. Being down in the village, they are very frustrating. Maybe if we are only going to have a few, maybe there is a designated area at the Mercantile or something where it's very specific where people can go to pay and not want to rip their hair out when they're doing so. So yeah, those are my thoughts and would love to hear from the other council members. Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. So a couple of my requests that I would like to get. One thing I would like to say regarding the what Katie shared with the economic development of the $25,000 as a fund. Maybe a question maybe I should ask earlier. As that's would that be used for a consultant based on a per hourly basis or per specific site? Is that how do you envision that allocation that you're asking for?
So after reaching out to so many different groups, I would suggest that we do a contract at an hourly basis. There's just certain areas in town and certain developments that struggle with different things that if we have an hourly consultant, we can really hit those issues head on rather than a lot of the retail strategies are really talking about helping you advertise for those sites and put them on the city website and then reaching out to big businesses to try to bring them in. But as I reached out to commercial property owners in town, they said, Katie, we're already doing that. Like we've got leasing agents, they're working hard, they get paid to do that. That would kind of get in the way of some of our efforts. So really through these brainstorms with different groups, it seems like the hourly contract and just as on an needed basis. So
as a project might come in, you might look at bringing, if the idea came in for a certain specific property, you would say, I might want to engage this additional support to help lure them in and understand the great things that we have to offer here in Capitola. Is that correct?
yeah, and an example would be the Citibank building over by the mall in front of Starbucks. That is a unique parcel that the drive-through is a challenge there. And so working with somebody who's specialized in economic development and also working with our own city engineer and just working through like what are the challenges to this site and how can we, what can we do in order to make changes. I've heard of other buildings in town that don't have good loading and don't have good loading areas and are having challenges getting tenants in. And so just working with those businesses to really define what is the challenge to this site and then get a personalized feedback and just to help those individual sites. When our 41st Avenue corridor group came in to study the corridor, they were really impressed at the how thriving 41st Avenue corridor is and our plazas and so that's really where we came about with these are really just specific sites that need additional help, and then also the village when those vacancies come up as well. So,
All right, thank you. So a question, I guess, back to Jim, is that the request that's asked of $25,000, is that already allocated in this budget, or is that going to come out of the general fund that's projected to be a surplus?
That has not been allocated, so that would come out of the surplus at this point.
All right, so that would be one thing I think is an investment in our community that's really important that we make, and so I would strongly encourage that. The next one was regarding Esplanade Park. As much in full agreement with the Councilmember Morgan, I would love to see us put some seed money towards that. If the numbers $100,000 would get us to a point that have a presentable document plan that we could go out and obtain some funding grants would be great. And so if there could be funds allocated to that, if that number's $80,000 could get us a plan that could go out, I'm not stuck on what the exact dollar is. I'll leave it up to Jessica and to make that exact recommendation, but some funding for that. Another follow-up, I think maybe Councilmember Morgan might have taken half my ideas here. Regarding the safety measures in town, the crosswalks and stuff like that, those can be funded out of the gas tax money, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so I think, I think we do an amazing job, like when a project like that comes in. What I was wondering is that can we allocate X amount of dollars in the gas tax that is restricted really, and that we can display to our community that, let's say it's $75,000, or if they're $80,000, could we allocate $80,000 so that potentially we can put 4 of those up throughout our community, but then our community knows that we are funding safety measure projects. So maybe if we can't, then my idea doesn't work, but are you able to allocate money against the gas tax? Jim, I wasn't sure of that.
Yes, there's different categories of expenditures that we can use. So there's like 4 different categories of gas tax, and each one we can put money. So some is for streetlight maintenance, some is for pedestrian and bike safety. There's, I think, street repairs, and then something else, striping. So we could combine those and do projects that way through gas tax, yeah.
Maybe if we could allocate that as, I don't know, a CIP project or something like that, but we know that it's a restricted funding, but then we can highlight to our community that we understand what the safety is in the community and what the needs are, and that we've allocated, but it's really restricted money. And so it's not just as an idea or a city council member comes up with those ideas, but I set aside. I also would like to see, I don't know what you call them, but the little radar traffic signs. I think those, personally think they work. If there's a request from a neighborhood or a community, a certain part of our citizens think that there's a need, that can be something that we can look at. The next one would be, I strongly like to make sure that the Park Avenue project moves forward, and if you have any idea what additional funding might be needed, if there's $65,000 less at this time, how much additional funding might be needed to do that, or is that project not designed yet? And would there be another source of revenue that can be used for that?
So that project we brought to the council some time ago and did do public outreach on prior to the rail trail discussion. So we do have something that is constructible as a striping project that has not been brought back to council in its final form. That particular project is about $120,000.
Thank you. So I would like to strongly encourage that. And then just around the TK program, if we're looking at that, which I am strong support of, just a couple of things around that would be that is there a way that, how will we look at who is going to serve? So would we kind of fall in line with like our junior guards program is serve the local community around that the junior guard program, so use that as our area of service. We're going to use elementary school. I'd just be interested in that, how that's going to work. And then what is the opportunity and who's that going to serve? Is it a certain, funding that is going to be only allocated for certain people? Is it going to be down to a requirement of providing income levels? And I would be interested to see if that has been thought out, or what that's going to look like, or if we're going to look at funding a program like that, and those sorts of things will be worked out at a different time. Where I'm after looking at that, I just want to make sure that I think our community does a great job in looking at extremely low income, and everything. But I really want to make sure that there's obviously an opportunity for the missing middle at the same time. And so, can we look at that program and allocate or make it a target that 10% or 20% are the missing middle that are just above the hump, but they need extra help at the same time. And so that would just be something I would like to look at in the process. And I know if this program's going to be running with Nikki and a third party, I know you have the ability to look at that, but just something I would like to share to look at that. And just if the money's going to be allocated out of the TOT restricted funds, how would we make, I guess we're potentially going to have a subcommittee that would then pull and then make recommendations, because obviously there's programs that have maybe budgeted or have the perception they might be getting the same funding again this year. And so obviously there's only so much to go around. And how that's going to look and what programs might not be funded to program or to run a program of the TK level to our community. So that's all I have at this time in my request. So just go ahead.
Maybe the city clerk could promote me. I'm going to maybe suggest a tool that we've used in other budget cycles before, where we have council members sort of putting dollar figures in. I've heard a couple of different projects, and so we can just keep track of it, and then we can kind of work together towards a motion. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that might be join as a panelist. Look at that. All right.
I haven't even made my comments
You
yet.
haven't made your comments yet. Yeah. So this is what I have so far. And obviously, we can get more direction as we sort of hone in on kind of where the council wants to land.
Just one question on the Esplanade Park. It'd be like a matching fund thing, right? So
maybe 50? Okay, yeah, I think this is a good why it's on the screen so everyone understands exactly where we're going.
Okay.
Councilmember Warbach.
All right. So I just want to commend the previous council, including Councilmember Morgan and Mayor Clark, for your vision to pursue all of these amazing projects on this CIP list. And kudos to Jessica and our public works staff. I know Kailash is in the house as well, for their success in getting all of this grant funding. I was just doing the math. I mean, our general fund to fund all of these amazing projects, we spend $3.3 million, and we're able to get over $8 million in grants. So that's awesome. So I think in looking at this next budget year or even a couple of years, right now we have 7 active projects. We have 0 projects for 2025, 2026. Sounds like we've got some ideas and wish lists already of projects we want to pursue. I think it's really important that we continue to have a vision to make improvements to our community that will increase the quality of life. I really do want to see that we prioritize our families and our communities. And we did get the pickleball survey already. So whether we can combine the pickleball courts with a playground at Monterey Park, that I would love to see as a project. I also really think we should prioritize this economic development strategy. I'm really, really excited. Thank you, Katie, for the vision. I love the rebranding of the department because that is what we should focus on. I know Santa Cruz has got their whole robust economic development department, and we don't have that. I think just setting aside funding for economic development is a great way to be proactive and to maintain our solvency in the coming years with our budgetary challenges. Let's see. What other comments do I have? The little campers. I know there is a increase already of 20% of 4 spaces for the current fiscal year. That's already budgeted. Is that right, Nikki? Okay. So let's just see how that goes. I think we should just see how it goes. I do like the idea of offering residents priority registration similar to guards and seeing what the uptake is. And if the uptake is really high and we have a really long wait list, then perhaps limiting the enrollment for the number of sessions makes sense to maybe max 2, because I know there are 4 sessions, to max 2, just so we can serve more families. We can think about how we utilize the ECYP funding, but I also really want to wait to look at what organizations we're currently giving grants to, because I still think the Boys and Girls Club, is important. So before we make those decisions, I'd like to, have that ad hoc committee in July and look at what organizations may be affected before we make big decisions. But I'm glad to see that there is an increase already for this next budget year. Let's see. As for Park Avenue, I know we've got, is it 60,000 left from the 100,000 or so to get to a fully funded project. We'll need 120,000, so additional 60,000. And my understanding is, these projects, street projects, similar to the big Coastal Railroad project, is we get funding from the RTC, we get funding from California CTC, right, Caltrans. So for street projects like this, do we also apply for grants through Caltrans?
Caltrans has many funding programs, and the ones that we are eligible for and have projects in the queue that meet those eligibility, we do apply for. A lot of them are based on communities of concern, which we typically aren't one, so we do miss out on a lot of funding grants. But yes, generally, if there is a program that would fund a project we have in the queue, we do go after those Caltrans grants.
Okay, so the Caltrans grantees will see that we denied Park Avenue, denied the $5 million free Park Avenue trail, and now is going to ask for money to improve Park Avenue. How is that going to look? How is our outlook of getting grants if we denied $5 million?
So grants directly from Caltrans, usually they consider grants they gave you that you, like the city, did not perform on. So I don't know if there's a direct correlation there. I will say grants administered by the RTC might have more of a direct correlation because they do go through their board.
Okay.
One point I guess I will add about Park Avenue, the reasoning behind it is I understand the project manager's confident that he's going to deliver the project. That's his job. That's what he's doing. I know that during the course of the discussions, we heard a number of different things from the RTC about whether they would pursue the coastal alignment, whether they would pursue not doing this section. There's always the possibility that the interim trail could get built. I think that there's just a few more chapters left to play in this thing. So that was what staff's thinking was, because it's possible at the end of the day that we could end up with no trail in that segment, and the RTC could say, hey, here's $250,000, City of Capitola, if you want to do a project. So that was the staff's thinking behind it. We can pursue it if council wants to, and I think $60,000 would get us that project with the street striping that we were proposing. Council hasn't seen it yet, but we'd be bringing it back for approval. But I just wanted everyone to be clear, there was no other communications beyond what we've heard publicly from during this process.
Which is why it's important for us to bring him back in July. I have met with Rob Tidmore as well and walked the segments with him. And I think from my understanding is they will pursue the coastal alignment for half of it. And I think in Coronado, they're gonna move to the inland side because that is their right of way.
Grove Lane, I think.
Grove. Sorry, thanks for the correction. It's halfway through. So I think it's maybe a good idea for us to wait and see what happens before we plunge in, but up for deliberation.
Thank you. Question about Park Avenue. If we started to work on it now, what's the timeline?
So if council was to fund moving forward with the Park Avenue alignment, we do have those plans in hand that we could represent to the council as directed. We do have a contractor on board for a pavement management project. There's a possibility that we could incorporate it into that project. Otherwise, we'd have to rebid the project and it would not be constructed probably until the early fall.
So there is some time in the early fall. Okay, that's nice to hear. So I'll make it easy for the Mr. City Manager. You could put me down on yes on just about everything, right down the line.
Yes, the trick is to get to 150 or less. So a yes doesn't have a total.
You mean I have to do math? I thought we had our finance.
This will do the math for you if you want. If you give me sort of your priorities, if you'd like to do park, we can start with that because that's, I think, it's going to need $60K if we want to do it.
Let's go with Esplanade Park for 2,000. No,
Okay.
Esplanade Park. Economic development. And I'll leave it right there, but I'm in favor of the rest of however the money can work out.
Okay, so at this point, what staff would be looking for would be a motion. Oh, and then the priority registration for campers. Yeah, it seemed like that was another, that one, it does not have a total to it.
Mine doesn't have a total.
I know. Do you want to clarify any of the amounts?
Well, I'm yesing on those amounts that are up there.
So I think that the dog park would take, I think we thought it was, if it was fully funded, close to 100,000. If you wanted to put some in as seed money for a community fundraising project, you could put less in. For Esplanade Park, I think 50,000 would be a good matching amount for a Measure Q application.
So I'll go 30 for the dog park, please. 50, 60. Oh, fine.
How much for the pickleball and playground?
So pickleball and playground. So my recommendation, the pickleball conversation is in its infancy. We have done a survey and there's been a lot of community support for pickleball courts. The location of where they would go has not been determined. So I think that there would be kind of two steps in that. One is get the pickleball survey presentation, and then secondarily sort of choose a key site for it, and then we would start the planning process. If you wanted to focus on a playground at Monterey Park, that could be more of a standalone thing, and we could use that as a potential, if you put money into it, as a seed money grant application kind of thing. So I think to prepare a plan for a Monterey Park, kind of tot lot type thing, is that what you're imagining?
Yeah, the playground.
Playground.
climb, swings, like what do you?
Kiddo or a big one? I'm imagining more like tot lot at library are we talking about, or sort of hidden park?
I don't know.
Because so for example, the design for Jade Street Park was, I think, on the order of 600.
Something for them to climb.
Yeah. So if we're talking about sort of a smaller scale thing, I think
Sure.
$100,000.
So like 50 grand then, if we want matching funds from Measure Q.
Yes.
And I mean, this could just be for 2025, 2026, and then move forward to 26, 27, right? Because every year Measure Q is going to have $1.2 million of potential grant programs to distribute. So we can have money to start the design and planning process and have projects queued up for funding.
That's correct.
How much would it cost for just design and planning?
I think, again, depending on the scale, but I think probably kicking something off at if you want to fund a design, we have found that we get very little interest from design consultants when we try to RFP things below $100,000, which sounds crazy. I think if we were doing a little tot lot, we probably would find a different way to maybe solicit bids. So 20
grand, okay.
I said design.
Got it.
25.
Yeah, I don't have that much money. So what now? I guess we can move forward with Esplanade because that's got the highest vote in economic development. And then that's $70,000. So we have an additional $50,000 to work on something else.
I'll make a motion to allot 20,000 for the RRFB, 50,000 for Esplanade Park, 60,000 for Park Avenue, and 20,000 for economic development.
I was wondering if for the $20,000 might be able to come out of the gas tax, so I don't think we'd have to allocate it into the extra funds. Is that correct?
Don't think, so there is funding for streets and sidewalks in the gas tax. I think that's part of our typical streets and sidewalks maintenance operating, sort of like the typical paint and things like that. So we could, but it would come, really?
What's happening?
It would come at the expense of maintenance, which probably doesn't meet the council's goal.
I just thought there was a lot more money in gas tax that could be allocated more than $20,000 a year. I thought there's different categories. Is that true?
If you give me,
There's about $280,000 a year that goes into gas tax. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the breakdown. I want to say for, there we go. No. So for streets and sidewalks, we have 35,000. For street painting, we have 30. And then we have admin and engineering, 50. And those are basically based on like historical trends of what we spend on just our annual costs. So we use the gas tax pretty much. If we were going, like Jamie said, if we were going to do something specific for a sign, it would probably come at the expense of something else that we maintain normally. Or it would defer, we would defer something.
Due to just budget constraints, could we do like a 50-50 split and fund it out of some of the surplus general and then fund the rest out of gas tax?
Yes.
yeah, I think.
So, okay, so I could amend my motion to a $10,000 ask for the RRFB. And I'm putting my other 10 back with the dogs.
there a second?
Is there a second on the floor?
My only apprehension around the dog park is just, I know we did a little bit of community outreach, but there's so much community outreach that I've been asked a lot of questions like, is that really going to happen and everything? So that was my only, I think the outreach that's happened has been by organized dog owners. And so knowing some of the community that said they haven't really been involved, so we haven't noticed anybody. And so just the process around that is just knowing why I have any apprehension around that.
My thought was like, this is just the very start, and so we could utilize the funding for more public outreach.
And then come back off the. I'm just saying, what if the community came back and was opposed to it or went to a different location, might cost more? Is there a cost really to proceeding, doing more public outreach that we have to budget, or is that just something that we could do in-house and bring it up if it's an idea, bring it up and do the community outreach to see, is that the best place? If there, what are the exact requirements around that? Do we have, does it have to be AD accessible, or, what those things are?
So public outreach in some ways is like the least expensive, most expensive thing we do. It takes the most amount of sort of staff time and resources. It kind of drains away from the ability to kind of do other projects. I will tell you, in my 17-year history, 16-year history with the city, dog parks has been a very contentious subject. It's been very hard. This has been the site that has been identified as probably the most feasible, in addition to the McGregor site, which we developed a decade ago or something like that. So I don't think there's another site in Capitola. I think we did kind of exhaust that process. But I do think that potentially there are some people who would be in opposition.
So can we go with a project that would have more community support, like the playground on Monterey Park?
There isn't a second, so you could make a friendly amendment.
Can I make a friendly amendment to include the Monterey Park and not put funding in the dog park for now? How do I do this?
I think you'd say I would second with a friendly amendment.
I would second with a friendly amendment to include funding for the design of a Monterey Park playground.
Great, we have a first and a second. Before I go to,
So the motion amendment has to be accepted by the maker. So Councilmember Morgan, do you accept the amendment proposed?
Yes, I'll accept the amendment, but the dog park's not over.
thank you. Well, before we get to the vote, I would like to thank our fine finance director for all of his work. And give the staff one last time if they wanted to add anything else, although it looks pretty good. They're up on that fine draft we have there. So looking for that, we'll take it to a vote. May I get a vote, please?
Councilmember Jensen?
Aye.
Councilmember Morgan?
Aye.
Councilmember Orbach?
Aye.
And Mayor Clark?
Aye. Motion passes. It looks like we won't be coming back until we do the final budget at our regular meeting, June 12th.
So just to clarify for the record, is it the council's decision to cancel the remaining 2 budget hearings?
It looks like it is. Does everybody agree?
Yes, please. Thank you.
And we'll have feedback from the fact for that last meeting on any changes that they might have.
Correct. Any recommendations from June 17th will be brought to the council at the 26th.
And would there be an update that you might provide to us if there's anything like way out of whack that we might have to, if something comes back from the fact? Sorry, I'm asking a question. With the fact, if there's anything that comes back from fact, if it's...
Yeah, I was just making sure I wasn't violating any Brown Act. Yeah, I can do like a Friday update, though, whatever that Friday is from the 17th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. That'll bring us to adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and take care of each other. We'll see you at the next meeting, June 12th.